I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, I'm delighted to welcome back to the show one of my favorite guests, a terrific author by the name of Rosemary Valenti Guarnera, and she has written a wonderful book. It is called Me and the General. This riveting biography tells the story of Ralph Liguori, a man whose life was dramatically shaped by his connections with mobster Charles Lucky Luciano and prosecutor Thomas E. Dewey. It is a tale of friendship, betrayal, and the blurry lines between legality and the underworld set against the backdrop of the early 20th century America. We're delighted to have this talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank her team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put her in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like her by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing her wonderful book. The links are below this interview. Rosemary, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
Nice to see you. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Well, it's great having you back on the show. Let's remind the audience what inspired you to tell Ralph Liguori's story now after all these years.
Hey, well, as I said, I've spent most of my life in Italy working for the government and the embassy and all that. And then an Italian asked me to help him run an international travel agency. And I said, okay, tired with the government, and I said for a while. And that is how I met Ralph. And when you're a travel agency, you have drivers who go to the airport,
Mhm.
up with a client, and then give them to the airport and so forth. And they know each other. So these two, my driver was talking blah 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 with another driver until this man comes up and he says, "What are you guys blabbing and blabbing about?" And so when he was told I was American, oh God, he was, exiled in Italy at that moment. He was so, he wanted to meet me, especially when he heard I was Sicilian. That's important for the Italians.
Mhm.
So that's how it happened, and we became friends because he just wanted to return to America. So he would come and we would talk, and all the time he was studying me. Could he trust me and all this stuff. Well, what happened was he was an intimate friend of Lucky Luciano, the boss of all bosses, the general, as he was known in the inner circles.
Mhm.
And it was 7 years, and so he was being persecuted by uh, Italian writers, American writers to write the story. So what had to happen before that? Martin Gosch, the film producer, got in touch, came to Rome, and wanted to do Lucky Luciano's life. And no, 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 no. And then finally he said, okay. So the day that Martin Koch wrote Martin Koch um, came, that's the time Lucky died at the bar. And of course,
Mhm.
there were all kinds of stories that it was the boys, getting her, but he was sick. He had heart attack. So that was okay. 10 years later, Martin Koch comes back and contacts Ralph. Ralph, blah, 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 blah. Will you do the story? And Ralph said, yes, and so that's when and then when he trusted me,
Mhm.
told me about it. And I said, I want you to come, and talk to the lawyer and all this. I said, fine, Ralph. Ralph, I'll help you out. Well, what happened? Martin Gosch dies.
Mhm.
Gets to things. And so now Ralph is alone, is alone. And so, like I said before, all the writers knew that, blah, 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 and he didn't trust the soul. But he looked at me and he said, Rosemary, you write it. Oh, yeah, God. It was my dream to write my first book, however. That was it. Well, anyway, that was it, Mr. Crawford. And it took 2 years of putting it all on tape with Ralph talking. I still have that. And then, it took years because I couldn't mistake. I couldn't make mistakes. And I did a lot of research coming back and forth and going to New York Ryle because the main reason for this book, apart from Ralph's biography, which is fantastic because it gives you an idea of what life was, the Roaring Twenties and the
Mhm.
Depression. and the beginning of the mafia and all that, So it's interesting in that way, and well, so then I just began to write and go back and forth because the main issue of the book is the 1936 prostitution trial, which has never been told, so precise, but it took me years to do this. And there is the story of where Thomas A. Dewey comes into, because he was a young prosecutor at the time, interested in big things, becoming governor and then maybe president.
Mm-hmm.
Ready, hitting on all the little gangsters. But he said, if I get the big guy, man, that's my road to the presidency. And that's the story. That's the true story. And so, I don't know how much you want me to say, but
Well, this prostitution trial was kind of uproarious, right? It was kind of an amazing trial, right?
absolutely, it was fantastic. And uh, Ralph had a terrific lawyer and so forth and so on. The judge, of course, was pro Dewey. Uh,
Mhm.
well, it was sad because Dewey was getting his way. He was getting Luciano, but he still needed help, and he tried to get Ralph. His was Luciano's intimate friend. To give him some help, and all that, and blah blah blah. And of course, Ralph would never squeal on his best friend. So that was how he got involved. So Dewey, in spite, framed him also into the prostitution trial. And that was kind of sad. And so the book has the story also, chapters on their life together also in jail, and then their life together in exile in Italy.
Hmm.
It's an interesting story of that era.
Yeah. And you wound up spending a portion of your life in Italy as well, right?
I didn't hear.
You wound up spending a portion of your life in Italy also.
Yes, that I don't know. I think it's fate that I got the opportunity to write it. But I'm keeping a promise, and it is kind of, I'm very fortunate that the book's coming along.
Hmm.
But I kept a promise on his deathbed. You know, on his deathbed, he took my hand and he just looked at me and he said, "Rosemary, the book. What could I do?" So my lifetime has been studying, and another author would be satisfied with all the good things they say about your book. But I kept the promise. I have to get him, this thing that he was framed, I have to get his name, clean. And it's on my head all the time, So I'm happy that you have me here again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tell the folks at home one or two facts about Ralph Liguori that they would find intriguing.
About his life, he
Sure.
was a very spectacular boy. He was a boy. He was born in Rome, Italy, of wealthy parents. Okay, wealthy parents, and they came to live in New York. But the point was, when his father passed away, uh, the livelihood, and so he got to work and all that to try to help the family. Although they were wealthy, they had a butcher shop, a Supreme supermarket, whatever, and but it wasn't enough. And so little by little, in that era, he got connected, and so
Hmm.
the bootleggers,
Yeah.
and so he got to know people, and he was so uh, fascinating. He was good looking, and he loved to dance. Oh, he was a terrific dancer. He danced with Rudolph Valentino.
Wow.
His buddies at the bar were Pat O'Brien and Spencer Tracy. People. Really, he everybody loved him. And then also the bad guys, that Frankie Yale was the first guy before Luciano, was a Sicilian and he had the Sicilian unions and all that. And there are stories where he helps everybody, but he won't get connected.
Mm.
Luciano wants him, and he starts to laugh and he says, "Okay, I know you, Ralph." He said, "I know you, But they kept close. They kept close in their lives.
Mm.
And then in jail, well, of course, Luciano ran the jail. He
Mm.
had all the boys up in the hill there, and that story is very good and interesting. They had the first Catholic church in a you know
Amazing.
yes, and my memory, and yes, and so that was it, and the sad part of this, the thing that Ralph will not forget was, and Dewey was behind this. When his time was up, uh, they thought, he thought he was going to go home, but the the government and behind Dewey, they exiled him to Italy.
Mm.
At the same time, so was Dewey. You know, Dewey didn't want Ralph free in New York to tell the stories.
Yeah.
So it's just an interesting story. And
It
then
is an interesting story. Time capsule stuff, too, of an era gone by with larger than life characters that really don't exist anymore. The name of the book is Me and the General. It's written by Rosemary Valenti Guarnera. It is a riveting biography that tells the story of Ralph Liguori, a man whose life was dramatically shaped by his connections with mobster Charles Lucky Luciano and prosecutor Thomas E. Dewey. It's a great story. It's a tale of friendship, betrayal, and the fine lines between legality and the underworld. Rosemary, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
thank you for having me, and I appreciate your interest, really.
I
Thank
appreciate your time. Great story, great storytelling. It's a wonderful book. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.